Why did she step off that helicopter when every instinct screamed at her to stay inside? Why walk into a world where even the air smelled like death and every sound promised it? The rotors whipped the dust into a choking storm, as if the desert itself wanted her gone. Dr. Sarah clutched her duffel bag so tightly her knuckles turned white. The acrid stench of diesel fuel and burning trash mixed with the distant thud of artillery. The sounds didn't just echo, they settled inside her chest like a warning. This was, this wasn't a classroom or a sterile conference room filled with theories and case studies. This was war. And war didn't care about psychology. You the shrink. The voice cut through the storm like a blade. Commander Jake stepped out of the swirling dust, a figure carved from war itself. Weathered face. Eyes hardened by too many deployments, too many funerals. His gaze raked over her, the civilian hiking boots, the psychology textbooks peeking from her bag, the way she flinched at each distant explosion. His look shifted from curiosity to disdain. Dr. Sarah, crisis negotiation specialist, she said, extending her hand. He didn't take it. Instead, he turned and barked orders to his men, who hauled ammunition crates off the helicopter with silent precision. Her hand hung in the air for a moment, then dropped, her face burning. "Lady, this isn't a therapy session," said finally, without looking at her. "People die here, real people, with real families, because of real bullets fired by men who don't give a damn about your feelings or your degrees." Sarah followed his gesture to the perimeter. Soldiers manned machine gun nests, eyes scanning the tree line with the restless vigilance of men who'd stared at death too long. An armored convoy rumbled through the gate, vehicles and pitted from IED blasts. Medics rushed to one of them. A young soldier pressed a blood-soaked bandage to his arm, his face pale but determined. The weight of what she'd volunteered for hit her like a physical blow. "That's exactly why I'm here," she said quietly, though her voice trembled. His eyes turned back to her, hard as flint. "You think you can talk the Taliban out of killing Americans? You think they'll sit down for a heart-to-heart about their childhood trauma?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I've got 12 good men under my command, 12 warriors who trust me to bring them home. I'm not about to let a civilian with a psychology degree get them killed because she thinks she can reason with monsters." An explosion echoed across the base, closer this time. Sarah flinched but forced herself to meet his stare. "Commander," she said, "I've spent 5 years studying every hostage standoff, every failed negotiation, every death that happened because the only tool we used was a hammer. I'm not here to replace your methods. I'm here to give you another option, for when your hammer isn't enough." Studied her for a long moment, then shook his head. "Welcome to Afghanistan, Doc. Try not to get anyone killed with your good intentions." It was not the welcome she had hoped for, but it was the one she got. Her first briefing happened in a cramped plywood room, the Tactical Operations Center. Maps covered every wall, littered with red pins, each one a mark of blood spilled or waiting to be spilled. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the tension of men who had seen too much combat. Sarah sat in the back, notebook ready, trying to look like she belonged. His team eyed her with skepticism sharpened into hostility. Lieutenant was at the front, pointing at a satellite image on the screen. "Increased chatter in the valley. 3 sources confirm Taliban fighters are." The siren cut him off. "Incoming." The first mortar landed 50 meters from the TOC. The ground shook. Dust poured from the ceiling. Sarah froze. The second shell struck closer, shattering windows. "Get down," roared, his voice slicing through her paralysis. In an instant he was on her, tackling her to the ground just as shrapnel tore through the space where she had been sitting. His body crushed the air from her lungs. Dust rained down. The acrid stench of cordite filled her nose, mixing with the metallic tang of fear in her mouth. 3 more shells hit in rapid succession, each closer, each a reminder that death here came casually without reason. Her face pressed against the cold floor's weight shielding her. She could feel his heart pounding against her back, not panicked, steady, controlled, a warrior's rhythm. "Welcome to Afghanistan, Doc," he shouted over the thunder, his breath hot against her ear. "Still think talking solves everything." The barrage lasted 90 seconds. It felt like a lifetime. When silence finally returned, rolled off her and stood, brushing dust from his uniform as if it were nothing, Sarah stayed on the floor, shaking, her notes scattered like scraps of a life that no longer fit. The SEALs went back to work as if nothing had happened, weapons checked, positions reassumed. The war didn't pause, not even for mortar fire. "You okay, ma'am?" Petty Officer Williams offered her a hand. His young face held concern that his commander did not. Sarah nodded, accepting his help. Blood trickled down her forehead from a small cut. "First time under fire?" he asked. She gave a weak nod. "It gets easier." He hesitated, sort of. That night in the thin metal walls of her assigned quarters, Sarah sat in silence. Through the walls she could hear the SEALs next door. $20 says she's on the next bird out," one voice laughed. "3 days, max," another said. "Nah," a third voice countered. "She's tougher than she looks. Did you see her face when tackled her? Pure terror, but she didn't cry." She stared at her Pashto language book under the dim glow of a flashlight. She traced the characters with trembling fingers. She didn't want to just learn the words. She wanted to understand the people, their pain, their reasons. She would prove them wrong. But outside, another convoy rumbled into the darkness. Soldiers on their way to patrol roads where every corner might hide death. And Sarah wondered if she would ever be strong enough. At 400 the knock came. The emergency briefing. She stumbled half awake into the TOC. Harsh fluorescent light, faces grim, the smell of gun oil and coffee. Colonel Hayes stood at the center. "We have a situation. At 2:30 hours, Taliban fighters seized the Kali school in. 12 hostages confirmed. 3 American aid workers, 2 British journalists, 7 local children, ages 6 to 14. Sarah's blood ran cold. The photos appeared on the table. A modest 2-story school, high walls, a single entrance, no clean lines for snipers, a fortress turned into a death trap. His voice cut in, "Previous attempts." Hayes nodded grimly. 2. Afghan National Army tried direct assault yesterday. 4 dead. No hostages recovered. British SAS attempted infiltration last night. Lost 2 operators. Hostage executed in retaliation. Silence filled the room. Sarah studied the photos, her heart pounding. The school looked small, ordinary, but in its walls sat a nightmare. "Timeline?" Sergeant Torres asked. 18 hours. After that, they've threatened to execute 1 hostage every hour until we withdraw. Leaned over the photos. Standard approach, breach east wall, room-to-room clearing, fast and violent, done in 10 minutes. Sarah leaned forward, scanning the intercepted communications among the papers. Something nagged at her. Not tactics, not logistics, something human. "Commander, may I hear the recordings?" she asked. Didn't look up. "Doc, we don't have time for psychological profiles. This is a tactical problem with a tactical solution." "But the language patterns." "They've got hostages," snapped. "That's all that matters." But Sarah persisted. "Listen to this line. He calls one of the children little sister. That's not militant language. That's emotional. That's human." "So he's sentimental," Torres muttered. "Doesn't make him less dangerous." "It makes him reachable," Sarah said. "Humans can be reasoned with." Finally looked up, his expression sharp. "You know what else humans can do? Pull triggers, detonate vests, murder children to make a point." He pointed at the photos of failed rescues. These operators were human too, didn't stop them from bleeding out. Hayes cleared his throat. "Doctor will accompany the team as an observer. Her insights may prove valuable. His face darkened. Sir, with respect, this is a combat mission, not a field study. Hayes didn't flinch. Wheels up in 6 hours, make it work. As the briefing ended, Sarah caught his arm. There's something else. That voice, I think he's just a kid. Stared at her like she'd spoken a different language. A kid with hostages, with weapons. A kid the military would treat as a target. And for the first time, Sarah realized something she hadn't told them. The boy they were about to kill might be someone she already knew. What would you do if the enemy's voice wasn't a man at all, but a boy? What if the one holding the gun was someone who should have been holding a schoolbook? Sarah sat in the intelligence bunker, headphones clamped tight, chasing fragments of static. Each word that surfaced through the noise carried more weight than gunfire. The voice wasn't deep, wasn't hardened. It cracked. It stumbled. It broke in ways no commander's voice ever would. She pressed pause, rewound, played it again, the same word, little sister, said with tenderness, said with love. This wasn't the language of a soldier. This was the voice of a child pretending to be something bigger, pretending to be terrifying because the world had already terrified him first. Her stomach twisted. Captain Brooks, she whispered, leaning over the analyst's shoulder. Run the stress patterns again. I want a vocal age profile. Brooks frowned but obeyed. Graphs bloomed across the screen. Patterns compared against databases. He can't be more than 16, Sarah said, staring at the results. Brooks raised an eyebrow. Sounds like the wolf to me. We've been tracking him for months. Leader of this cell, ruthless. Isn't Sarah murmured. It's his real name. They called him the wolf to make him sound older, scarier. Brooks pulled up a file. Solid intel. His cells hit convoys, ambushed patrols, blood on his hands. Sarah wasn't listening anymore. She was scrolling through the file, her heart slowing to a crawl. A grainy photograph appeared, a school portrait. A boy, bright eyes, a toothy gap-toothed smile, a Manchester United jersey. Her throat closed. Because she remembered him. Not the photo, not his face, but his name. And the night it all went wrong. 6 months earlier, a raid, a confirmed bomb maker. Her analysis of intercepted chatter had been the final green light. She signed the recommendation. She believed it would save American lives. The strike had hit, hard, precise, clean. Until it was. The target's compound was next to a wedding, and in the confusion of fleeing figures, a drone had fired. 1 building leveled, 14 civilians killed, parents, grandparents, cousins, 3 sisters, 2 brothers. His family. All of them. The file lay open in front of her, but Sarah didn't need it. She saw them in her mind. She'd memorized every name in the aftermath, a ritual of punishment she carried quietly. 7 loved butterflies, wanted to be a teacher. 11 built model airplanes from scrap metal, dreamed of flying. Bibi grandmother, wove carpets, passed down old patterns to the children. And the others, all wiped out in one strike. Her strike. Her voice, her analysis, her signature. Her decision had turned a boy into a wolf. She found in the armory. He was cleaning his rifle, movements deliberate, ritualistic. Commander, she said, forcing the words past her dry throat, I need to show you something. Unless it's blueprints or enemy positions, I'm not interested. Isn't who you think he is. He's not a hardened terrorist. He's a boy, 16, maybe younger. He lost his entire family in one of our strikes. Didn't look up. Doesn't matter if he's 16 or 60. He's got hostages. He's got weapons. That makes him a target. He slammed a magazine into place. You want to psychoanalyze him? Do it after we put him down. Just talk to him. The time for talking ended when he picked up a gun and put it to a child's head. The argument was over. His tone made that clear. But the guilt gnawed at her, and she couldn't let it go. The insertion began under a moonless sky. Sarah moved with the seals across the jagged terrain. Her civilian boots slipped on loose rock. Her pack felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, loaded with communication gear she wasn't sure would even let her use. Every few minutes, his hands shot up. The team froze. Sarah froze with them, her heart thundering so loudly she feared the enemy could hear it. "Stay low, keep quiet. Watch your footing," Williams whispered at one halt, his voice tight with concern. She nodded, tried, failed. It happened in an instant. Her boot caught a rock, she stumbled, crashed into Tors. Tors toppled into a pile of rusting Soviet ammunition crates, the sound reverberating like a dinner bell across the valley. The metallic clang hung in the air, too loud, too final. Was on her in seconds, his face inches from hers. His eyes burned with fury. "You just compromised our mission," he hissed. "Every hostile in the valley knows we're here now." "I'm sorry, Sorry doesn't bring back dead operators." His voice was a razor. "You're going to get us all killed." For 20 minutes they held their breath in the dark, waiting for gunfire, for shouts, for death to come. But it didn't. Not yet. Sarah pressed herself into the rock, fighting tears. She felt the eyes of the team boring into her, doubt solidifying into anger. She wasn't just unwanted now. She was a liability. At the village outskirts, the school loomed, a silhouette against the starlit sky. Snipers took positions. The assault team spread. Sarah found herself shoved into the makeshift command post 200 meters back, eyes on the target through her night scope. She focused on the windows, movement, shadows, a flash of light from a weapons check. Then something else. A sound. She adjusted her headset, straining. A voice, high-pitched, young, singing. A lullaby. The words were familiar. Her translator had taught her once. The Morning Bird, a song Afghan mothers sang to comfort frightened children. Her chest tightened. "Do you hear that?" she whispered to who scanned through his scope. "Hear what?" "The singing. Someone's comforting them. That's not the behavior of a hardened killer. That's—" Doc's voice was stone. "Humanity doesn't stop bullets, and it won't save hostages." But Sarah couldn't let go of the sound. A boy's trembling voice, trying to protect the children he was holding captive. And she knew it. The boy inside was still human, still reachable, still broken enough to be saved. If only someone would try. When Sm's megaphone crackled to life, the village walls carried his ultimatum. His Pashto was sharp, clear, practiced. "This is the United States military. You are surrounded. Release the hostages. Surrender your weapons. You have 5 minutes." Through her scope, Sarah saw the panic ripple inside the school. Lights flickered. Shadows moved. Voices raised in frantic debate. Then one rose above the others, young, shrill, terrified. "That's him," Sarah whispered. "He's scared." "Good," muttered. "Fear makes people make mistakes." But the mistake was. A window opened. A figure appeared, dragging a man in Western clothes, a hood over his head, hands bound. Sarah whispered, her heart sinking. The boy's voice cracked in broken English. "You killed my family. Now I kill yours." The hostage trembled, forced to his knees. A knife glinted in the light. His voice was flat. "Snipers, do you have a shot?" "Negative," came the reply. "He's using the hostage as a shield." Sarah grabbed Sm's arm. "Let me talk to him, please." "Absolutely not." His voice was steel. "He's escalating, that's all this is." The knife raised. The hostage's muffled screams cut through the night. Sarah's breath caught as the blade descended. Not clean, not practiced, hesitant, shaking. The boy wasn't a killer. He was forcing himself to be. But the blade still cut. The hostage collapsed. The courtyard filled with silence, broken only by Sarah's choked gasp. She knew the face behind the hood now. Dr. James, a pediatrician, a man who had treated Afghan children for years. Gone. His voice snapped. That's it, we're going in, immediate assault. No, Sarah begged. He's terrified. If you go in now, he'll kill them all. Give me 5 minutes. You'll be dead in 30 seconds. His jaw clenched. We breach in 2. Sarah's hands trembled as she adjusted the intercept equipment, scanning desperately for another clue. Another opening. Static voices, then one phrase cut through. The final gift. Her blood ran cold. He's talking about bringing down the walls, Sarah whispered. His father was a demolitions expert. He's rigged the building. Froze, for the first time, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Doc, how sure are you? 90%, maybe more. If your men breach, we all die. A glow appeared in a second-floor window, a digital timer, red numbers counting down. 11 minutes. Sarah pointed, her voice breaking. It's not a bluff, it's real. Assault order died on his lips. His men waited at the walls, seconds from moving, and suddenly silence. For the first time, the commander who had mocked her, doubted her, hated her, was listening. But listening might not be enough. Because the clock was already ticking, what would drive someone to walk straight into death? Not bravery, not madness, something else, a decision no one else could make. Sarah's eyes stayed fixed on the timer glowing red in the school's window. 10 minutes and counting. Each digit felt like a nail being driven into the coffins of 12 innocent lives. Commander, she said, her voice breaking, if you breach, that building comes down. Your men, the hostages, everyone, you have to let me try. You're insane, growled. That boy isn't waiting to talk, he's waiting to kill. You step in that courtyard, you're a corpse. Sarah's hands moved quickly, unbuckling her helmet, unclipping her vest. Kevlar dropped to the dirt with a dull thud. The team behind her went silent, watching the madness unfold. I'm not going in armed, she said, her voice steady. He's a child, Commander, and a child doesn't need another soldier pointing a rifle at him. He needs someone who will listen. You don't have authority. I'm a civilian contractor, she cut him off, stepping past his outstretched hand. And those are civilian hostages. You don't own me, Commander, not tonight. His jaw tightened, fury barely contained, but he didn't stop her. Because he couldn't. The courtyard stretched before her like the mouth of hell. Blood pooled where Doctor's body lay, black in the spotlight. The silence pressed down like a physical weight, broken only by the hum of the timer's glow. Sarah raised her hands high. Her voice cut through the stillness in Pashto. My name is Sarah. I want to talk to you about your family. The response was immediate. Gunfire erupted from 3 windows. Bullets spat sparks off the concrete around her. She dove behind a broken wall, her heart hammering so loudly she thought it would burst. Jesus Christ, his voice exploded in her earpiece. All units, civilian is taking fire. No, Sarah screamed, clutching her radio. Do not return fire, he's panicking. If you shoot now, you'll trigger the device. The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Silence again. The timer glowed, 8 minutes. She forced herself up, hands high once more, stepping from cover. I know about your mother, she called, her voice trembling but strong. I know about Fatima. I know about the night they died. The silence deepened. Shadows moved behind the broken glass. A child sobbing carried faintly through the walls. Another step forward. Behind her's voice crackled with panic. Doc, you are walking into a kill zone with no exit. This is suicide. Sometimes, she whispered, suicide is the only sane choice left. At the second-floor window, he appeared. The boy. A rifle gripped in trembling hands, aimed at her chest. His head too small beneath the hat. His cheeks streaked with dirt and tears. Even across the distance, she could see the weapon quivering with every sob. Stop, he screamed in broken English. Stop or I kill you like the others. Sarah froze, but she did not lower her hands. I'm not armed, she called back in Pashto. I came to talk about your mother, about Bibi Ghul, about how she sang to you when the bombs fell." The boy flinched, his grip wavered. How do you know her name?" His voice cracked, almost childlike. "Because I was there that night," Sarah said, each word like swallowing glass. "Not in your village, in the command center. I was the one who analyzed the intelligence. I was the one who said the strike should go forward." His face twisted in rage and grief. "You killed them," he screamed. "You killed my family." "Yes," Sarah said softly, "and I carry their faces every day." She was 7. She loved butterflies. She wanted to be a teacher. The rifle shook violently now, his sobs audible. She practiced writing her name every day in the dirt," whispered. "She wanted to show my uncle when he visited." Sarah's own tears blurred her vision. "Your mother wouldn't want this. She died protecting children. Don't dishonor her memory by killing them." "They're not my children," he roared. "My children are dead. My family is dead because of you, because of all of you." The timer ticked mercilessly, 6 minutes. "I know," Sarah said, her voice thick. "Nothing I say can bring them back, but killing these children won't bring yours back either. It will just create more grief, more orphans, more boys like you." Her earpiece crackled. Tense whisper, "Doc, whatever you're doing, do it faster. We're out of time." Sarah ignored him. Her eyes stayed locked on. "Look at me. Do I look like a soldier? Do I look like someone who wants to hurt children?" The boy's red-rimmed eyes focused. He shook his head slightly, confusion breaking through fury. You are American. You are the enemy." "I'm a doctor," she said. "I came here to help, just like Doctor, the man you killed tonight. He spent 3 years healing Afghan children. Hundreds. He wasn't your enemy." "Lies," another voice shouted from inside. An older man hidden in the shadows, urging not to listen. But's eyes stayed on her. "Your sister had a scar on her left hand," Sarah pressed gently. "From falling off your uncle's bicycle. She hated it, thought it made her ugly. But your mother told her it was a mark of courage, that brave girls always had scars." The rifle slipped from his hands and clattered against the window frame, collapsed against the sill, sobbing. "Stop, please stop." Sarah took another step forward. Only 30 meters separated them now. "Your mother's last words were about you," she whispered. "The neighbor who survived said she was calling your name, telling you to run, to live, to remember that love is stronger than hate." Behind him, the older man shouted louder, angrier. His hand hovered near a backup detonator. The timer glowed, 4 minutes. Sarah pleaded, her voice urgent. "Your mother died protecting life. Don't let her memory be stained with the blood of more children." The boy's voice cracked. "But the pain, it never stops. Every day I wake up, they are still gone. Every night I dream of them calling for help." "I know," Sarah whispered. "I know, but killing won't stop the pain. It will only pass it on, to more families, to more children." The timer glowed brighter, 3 minutes. She stepped closer still. 20 meters, close enough to see the softness in his hands, the hands of a boy who should have been holding a book, not a gun. "What was your favorite subject in school?" she asked suddenly. His tear-streaked face lifted, startled. "What?" "Before all this," she said gently, "what did you love to learn?" He swallowed hard. "Engineering, my uncle, he built bridges." "Bridges bring people together," Sarah said softly. "They help children walk safely to school. They connect families. That's what your uncle did. He built connections. You can too." Behind him, the older man, his handler, not his kin, shouted in Pashto, words like duty, paradise, revenge. His hand hovered near the detonator. The timer flashed, 2 minutes. His eyes locked on Sarah's, wet and pleading. "I don't know how to stop it. My uncle said once it starts, it can't be stopped." "Then help me save the children," Sarah urged. "The back stairwell, can you get them out?" "Yes, but he has the keys," whispered, pointing at the older man. The handler barked again, furious now. Sarah's heart pounded. 90 seconds. Then we give him a reason to look away, she said, and in that moment she made her choice. She ran, straight for the school's main entrance. The timer flashed, 1 minute. Sarah burst through the door. The hallway glowed red from the timer's harsh light. The device sat wired to the building's supports, a beast ready to consume them all, and beside it the older man, the bomb maker. His hand gripped the backup detonator. His eyes burned with fanaticism. "American," he screamed, "you die with us." But Sarah's eyes weren't on him. They were on, standing at the top of the stairs with a ring of keys in trembling hands. Their eyes met. He nodded once, then turned to the children. 30 seconds. The older man spun, realizing the betrayal. He lunged toward the rear of the building. Sarah threw herself at him, tackling him around the waist. The detonator skittered across the floor. "Run," she screamed, her voice cracked. "Get them out." The timer glared, 15 seconds. The handler clawed at her face, teeth bared. She clung to him with everything she had, every ounce of strength she didn't know she still carried. Through the chaos, she heard the sound she prayed for, children's voices, screaming, crying, running. His voice in her earpiece, sharp and urgent. "We've got them, we've got the kids." 10 seconds. She looked up, stood frozen in the doorway, keys still in his hand, his face torn between escape and something else. A choice. 5 seconds. Their eyes locked. And then the boy ran, not away but toward her, toward the handler, toward the device. He threw himself on top of the older man, just as the timer reached 0. But the explosion never came. Only a pop, a burst of sparks. The device fizzled into smoke. Had ripped the detonation cord free in his desperate tackle. The building trembled, but it did not fall. The children were safe. And in the silence that followed, broken only by sobs, Sarah realized something she had not dared believe. The boy who had been turned into a weapon had just chosen to be human again. What do you say to a child who just saved lives after taking one? What words could ever fit between guilt and redemption? The smoke cleared slowly, drifting through the shattered hallway. Dust hung in the air like ash after a funeral. Sarah lay flat on the floor, chest heaving, her body aching from the struggle. She blinked against the stinging haze, half expecting fire, collapse, death. But there was none. The bomb hadn't gone off. Beside her, the older man groaned, blood trickling from his temple where he'd struck the concrete. His hand twitched toward the detonator still lying on the floor, but before he could reach it, Tors stormed in, boot grinding down hard on the man's wrist. "Easy there, old man," Tors muttered, yanking the detonator away. "War over for you." Sarah pushed herself upright, her vision blurred, her body trembling with adrenaline, and then she saw him. Knelt nearby, small and broken, his hands clutching at the remains of the bomb's wires. His chest rose and fell in uneven gasps. His face, still streaked with dirt and tears, looked impossibly young now, the face of a boy who should have been worrying about school exams, not life-and-death choices. "I stopped it," he whispered, staring at his own hands in disbelief. "I actually stopped it." The words cracked something inside Sarah, tears welled. She reached toward him but stopped short, not wanting to push, not wanting to claim what wasn't hers to take. Heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway, and his team swept in, weapons raised, eyes scanning every corner. Precision, discipline. Their formation never wavered, not even after years of war had frayed their souls. But when's gaze landed on Sarah and the boy sitting side by side, something flickered across his face. Not victory, not anger, something closer to awe. "Status report," he barked into his radio, though his eyes never left them. "Building secure," came the reply from outside. "Device neutralized, all hostages safe, minimal injuries." The words washed over Sarah like a tide, all safe. The children, the journalists, the aid workers, safe. And still she couldn't breathe, not fully. Because sitting next to her was the boy who had murdered Doctor minutes ago. A boy who had chosen, in the end, to save others. A contradiction no after-action report would ever understand. His hands shook as he turned to her. "What happens to me now?" His voice was small, fragile. Stepped forward, his weapon lowered but not forgotten. "That depends on a lot of things, son, but right now, you just saved lives, that counts." His face crumpled. "I killed a man, a good man. He was helping my people. I murdered him." Sarah's throat tightened. She could have offered comfort, could have told him it wasn't his fault, that grief had made him blind, but she didn't. Because lies didn't heal. "Yes," she said softly, steadying her own trembling voice. "You killed Doctor, and you'll have to live with that for the rest of your life. But tonight you also chose to save 7 children. That choice matters too." Broke then. His sobs filled the hallway, raw and unguarded. Sarah didn't reach for him. She simply sat close enough that he could feel her presence, the quiet proof that he wasn't alone anymore. Outside, dawn broke slowly over. The mountains blushed with pink and gold, as if the earth itself was surprised the school was still standing. The hostages huddled under blankets, medics tending to wounds. Soldiers scanned the perimeter with rifles at the ready, though the battle was already over. Sarah sat on the concrete steps, exhausted, dust coating her hair and skin. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only the hollow echo of survival. Sat beside her, silent now, staring at the ground. His shoulders sagged under a weight no boy should ever carry. "What will you do now?" she asked gently. His eyes stayed fixed on the dirt. "I don't know. I've been angry for so long, I don't remember how to be anything else." Sarah turned toward him, her own voice soft, worn thin. "Anger is easy, healing is hard, but your mother would want you to try." For the first time, his eyes met hers without rage. They held only confusion, and maybe the faintest spark of hope. Approached, his shadow falling across them both. He looked older in the dawn light, his face carved with exhaustion. "Doc," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology, and probably my career." Sarah blinked at him, too tired to summon words. "Why your career?" "Because I'm going to recommend every unit in this theater gets someone like you, a negotiator." His jaw worked, reluctant even now to admit it. "I thought you were a liability. Hell, I thought you'd get us all killed. Instead," his eyes shifted to, "you saved us." Sarah didn't answer, she only nodded. Words felt too small. 3 months later, the world called it the Miracle at. Sarah stood in a converted shipping container at Forward Operating Base Shank, its walls plastered with maps and case studies. What had begun as grudging recommendation had grown into a full-scale program. 20 special operations personnel sat in folding chairs before her, listening as she spoke. "The key," Sarah said, her voice firm now, seasoned by fire, "is understanding that behind every weapon is a human being with a story. Your job isn't to become therapists. It's to recognize when talking might achieve what shooting cannot." Skeptical faces, hardened eyes, but they listened. "Not every situation can be resolved," she continued. "Some men are too far gone. But sometimes 5 minutes of listening can save more lives than 5 hours of gunfire." She clicked the projector. A slide appeared, Captain receiving a commendation. Last month he convinced a suicide bomber to surrender. Not a terrorist, a farmer, desperate after drought destroyed his crops. Extremists convinced him martyrdom would feed his family, but instead he chose life. In the back of the room sat with arms crossed, no longer hostile, no longer doubting, his expression unreadable except for the faintest trace of pride. The door creaked open. Entered quietly, carrying a stack of translated transcripts. He looked different now, cleaner, steadier, still young but not broken in the same way. Sarah smiled. "This is," He's been working with intelligence teams to identify language patterns in intercepted chatter. His insights have already prevented several disasters. Some of the operators shifted uncomfortably. To them, he was still a terrorist who'd gotten lucky, but Sarah pressed on. He knows better than anyone how anger twists truth, how loss becomes weaponized, and he's choosing to turn that knowledge into something that saves lives. Lowered his eyes, embarrassed, but Sarah caught the faint lift of his shoulders, pride buried but alive. After the session, handed Sarah a folder, classified, thick. Marines in Helmand, barricaded subject. He's been holding his family hostage for 6 hours. Former Afghan soldier, PTSD, head injury. Sarah scanned the file, her chest tightening. This is exactly where negotiation matters. Understanding his pain could make the difference. Wheels up in 2 hours, said. As he left, lingered, hesitant. Doctor, he asked quietly, do you think my mother would be proud of me, helping instead of hurting? Sarah looked at him, at the boy who had been enemy, killer, savior. A boy trying to stitch humanity back together. I think, she said, her voice trembling, she'd be amazed by your courage to choose healing over hatred. For the first time, smiled, not much, but enough. That night, as Sarah packed for another mission, she caught her reflection in the mirror, dust still in her hair, a thin scar on her forehead from that first mortar attack. She thought about's words, about's trembling hands on the wires, about's body in the courtyard. And she realized something. Redemption doesn't erase guilt. It doesn't bring back the dead. But sometimes it saves the living. And sometimes that has to be enough. What if the man with the gun wasn't an enemy, but someone who once fought beside you? What if the monster inside the barricade was a father broken by war? The helicopter touched down hard in Helmand province. Dust rose, swirling against the fading light. Sarah gripped the edge of her seat, bracing as the rotors whipped grit into her eyes. It had been months since, but war didn't pause. It shifted. It demanded. It tested whether her miracle had been luck or if it could be repeated. Leaned across the cabin, his voice cutting through the roar. Subject's name is former Afghan National Army, head injury from an IED, got discharged. Locals say he's been unstable ever since. Sarah nodded, her stomach heavy. PTSD, brain trauma. A man once trusted with a rifle now trapped inside his own mind. He's barricaded inside his home, continued. Wife and 2 kids, threatening to kill them if anyone approaches. How long? Sarah asked. 6 hours. Negotiation attempts failed. Afghan police surrounded the compound, but he fired on them. They're calling us in before this turns into a massacre. Sarah tightened her grip on her pack. What does he want? His eyes narrowed. He keeps shouting the same thing, that nobody listens, that his family's already dead even if they walk away. The helicopter touched down. The world roared back into her ears. Shouting soldiers, the smell of sweat and fear, the night air heavy with gun oil. This wasn't a mission about enemies. It was about one man's war against himself. The compound was small, squat mud walls glowing orange in the lamplight. Afghan police trucks blocked the street. Civilians pressed against barricades, their whispers sharp with fear. Sarah crouched behind cover, studying the house. No movement in the windows. No lights, just silence broken by the occasional desperate cry of a woman inside. He's not a terrorist, Sarah murmured. He's a soldier who can't turn the war off. Doc said, kneeling beside her. Don't romanticize him. He's pointing a gun at his kids. That makes him dangerous. End of story. Sarah glanced at him. Or it makes him broken. And if we treat broken like dangerous every time, what does that say about everyone who comes home from this war? Didn't answer. His jaw tightened, but he didn't stop her when she picked up the radio. She called in Pashto, her voice calm, carrying through the speaker. My name is Sarah. I am not a soldier. I don't want to hurt you. Silence. Then a voice, harsh, cracked. Lies, all of you want to hurt me, you already did, you took everything from me. Sarah's throat tightened. I didn't take anything from you, but I want to listen, tell me what they took. A pause. Then shouting, my honor, my service. They said I was brave, then they threw me away like trash when my head broke. His voice splintered. I gave them my blood, my brothers, my body. And what did they give back? Silence. Sarah closed her eyes. She recognized that voice. Not his, but the tone. She'd heard it in veterans back home, in soldiers who'd sat across from her in clinical sessions, fists clenched, eyes wet, begging for someone to understand. You served, she said softly. You fought for your country, and then you came home broken, and nobody helped you. A guttural sob echoed from the house. His voice hissed in her earpiece. Doc, he's escalating. We need a breach plan. No, Sarah whispered back. He's not escalating. He's unraveling. If we rush him now, his last act will be pulling that trigger. Minutes bled into hours. Sarah sat in the dirt, her voice steady, talking into the radio. She asked about his service. He shouted about the battles he'd survived. She asked about his family. He cried about the nights he woke screaming, fists clenched around nothing. They don't understand, he said. My wife, my children, they see me as a monster now. I scare them. Because the war is still inside you, Sarah replied gently. But you are not a monster. You're a father who loves his children. That's why they're still alive right now, because you love them more than the pain. Silence. Then the sound of quiet sobbing. Knelt beside her, whispering urgently. Doc, his wife says he hasn't slept in days. He's been hearing voices. Classic psychotic break. If he snaps, it's over. Sarah nodded, her throat tight. Then I have to give him something stronger than the voices. She called again. Do you remember the first time you held your daughter? The first time she wrapped her fingers around yours? The silence inside stretched. Too long, too dangerous. Then a broken sound, half laugh, half sob. She was so small, I thought I would crush her if I held too tight. Sarah's eyes burned. She's still small, and she still needs you. But if you pull that trigger, the last thing she'll see is her father turning into the monster he fears most. The cry that came next was raw, animal, the sound of a man breaking. I don't want to be that, he whispered. Then put the gun down, Sarah pleaded. Come out with your family. Let them see the man who held them safe, not the man the war left behind. The door creaked open. His rifle snapped up. Every soldier's finger tightened. But it wasn't gunfire that came. It was. He stumbled into the lamplight, his rifle dangling loose in one hand, tears streaming down his face. His wife clung to his arm. 2 children peeked out behind her, eyes wide, trembling. Sarah rose slowly, hands lifted, every breath measured. Give me the rifle, she said softly, and take your daughter's hand instead. He looked at the weapon. His grip faltered, and then, with a sob, he let it fall. The metal clattered against the dirt. His daughter's small fingers slipped into his instead. And in that moment, Sarah saw not a monster, not a terrorist, not even a broken soldier. She saw a father who wanted desperately to be whole again. Hours later, the compound was quiet, had been taken for medical care. His family wrapped in blankets, watched over by neighbors. Sarah sat against the mud wall, exhaustion sinking into her bones. Lowered himself beside her, his rifle across his knees. You keep doing this, he muttered. Doing what? Walking into places where only bullets are supposed to go and making us all look like fools for not trying first. His jaw worked. Doc, you saved them tonight. Again. Sarah didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on the little girl, now fast asleep against her mother's chest. Because she knew tomorrow, another name, another face, another broken man would come. And she wondered how long her voice could keep saving lives in a place built on war. The next morning, before boarding the helicopter back, approached her. He had come along as interpreter, his presence quiet but steady. "You spoke to him like he was still a soldier," said thoughtfully, "not like he was an enemy." "Because he wasn't," Sarah replied, tilted his head studying her. "Sometimes I wonder if that's what you saw in me, not an enemy, just a boy." Sarah's throat tightened. "That's exactly what I saw." For a long moment they stood in silence. The war rumbled on around them. Convoys rolled, radios cracked, but in that silence something like understanding bridged the space between them. When the helicopter lifted off, Sarah looked down at the compound shrinking beneath her. The mud walls, the streets, the families huddled in the early light. She thought of the rifle clattering to the dirt, of his daughter's hand in his. And she knew something true, something simple. War broke men, but sometimes words could keep them from shattering completely. What happens when saving lives begins to threaten the system that sends men to die? What happens when hope itself becomes dangerous? The after-action reports piled higher than Sarah's desk could hold. 3 missions, 3 different crises, all resolved without a single bullet fired. Each one carried the same phrase stamped across the top: non-standard resolution. It was meant as praise. It was meant as warning. She sat alone in the converted shipping container that now served as her office, staring at the flicker of the old desk lamp. Her body was exhausted, but her mind refused rest. The details haunted her. The farmer who surrendered his suicide vest, the ex-soldier who laid down his rifle, the boy who disarmed a bomb meant to kill them all. Each success was a life saved. Each success was also a reminder. These were exceptions, fragile victories in a war built on the expectation of violence. The door banged open. Entered, tossing a classified folder onto her desk. His expression was hard, his jaw locked. "Command wants answers," he said. Sarah frowned, flipping open the file. Transcripts, reports, a directive from regional command. Answers for what? For why the hell we're letting a civilian psychologist rewrite battlefield doctrine, snapped. Sarah's stomach tightened. They're questioning the program. They're not questioning, said bitterly. They're moving to shut it down. Too risky, they say, too unpredictable, too soft. Her pulse quickened. Too soft, we've saved lives, American lives, Afghan lives, is that the point? Leaned forward, his voice low, bitter. The point, Doc, is that war has rules. You engage. You eliminate threats. You don't walk into kill zones with your hands in the air and gamble that a broken kid won't pull the trigger. Sarah stared at him. So you agree with them? His eyes flickered. For once, his anger didn't mask the truth. I don't know what I agree with anymore. All I know is you've made me doubt everything I was trained to do, and doubt is a dangerous thing out here. Later that night, Sarah sat awake on her cot, listening to the muffled laughter of soldiers in the next container. Her hands traced the scar on her forehead, a reminder of that first mortar attack. She thought She thought of the children huddled together in the dark, waiting for someone to save them. She knew the risk. She knew the criticism. But she also knew the truth. Every person she had reached wasn't just a saved life. They were proof. Proof that war didn't always have to end in bodies on the ground. And maybe that was what terrified the generals most. Because if talking could work, what did that say about every bullet fired before? The summons came at dawn. The conference room inside Regional Command was cold, air-conditioned to the point of discomfort. Maps and monitors covered the walls. A panel of officers sat in silence as Sarah entered. Stood off to the side, arms folded, his expression unreadable. "Doctor," the lead general said, his voice clipped. "Your methods have drawn attention." Sarah swallowed hard. "Attention, sir." "Your unconventional approach has saved lives," the general admitted. "But it has also endangered missions. You've inserted yourself into combat zones, violated protocol, undermined chain of command." His eyes hardened. We cannot afford this level of unpredictability. With respect, sir, Sarah said, her voice trembling but steady, predictability is what got Doctor killed. It's what nearly buried 12 children under rubble. Sometimes the standard playbook is the worst option. Another officer leaned forward. We are not in the business of experiments, Doctor. We are in the business of security, and your experiments compromise that security. Sarah's chest tightened. They're not experiments, they're people. Silence filled the room, heavy, final. We're considering transferring you back stateside, the general said, effective immediately. The words struck harder than any explosion. Her mouth opened, then closed. There were no arguments strong enough to break the wall of military certainty before her. Back at Fobshank, Sarah sat in the training room, staring at the faces of the soldiers she had been instructing. Hardened eyes softened by curiosity. Men and women who had begun to believe, even just a little, that there was another way. She thought of the boy who had once been called a wolf, now translating quietly at the back of the room. She thought of the father who had laid down his rifle. She thought of every whispered, what if her presence had sparked? And she realized something. Even if they sent her home, the idea was already here. The seed had been planted. That evening found her sitting outside, the mountains painted in fading red by the setting sun. He dropped onto the step beside her, silent for a long time. Finally he spoke. They want you gone. Sarah nodded. I know. Are you going to fight it? She looked at him, eyes tired but burning with quiet fire. Would it matter? Was silent, his face lined with conflict. You change things, he said at last. Whether command admits it or not, you made me question everything, and I hate you for that. Sarah gave a faint smile. You're welcome. Shook his head. Don't get cocky, Doc. You might be right about some of this. But the second someone dies because we waited to talk, the second one of my men doesn't come home, they'll crucify you, and I won't be able to stop it. Sarah's voice was soft but unyielding. Then I'll carry that weight, the same way I carry, because the alternative is carrying more names on more headstones. Didn't respond. He just stared at the mountains, jaw tight, as if searching for answers in the jagged peaks. 2 weeks later, the call came. A crisis in Kandahar. A bus hijacked on the highway. Dozens of civilians trapped inside. Armed men threatening to execute one passenger every 15 minutes until demands were met. Command didn't want Sarah there, but the field team insisted. And so, once again, she found herself stepping into a storm she had no guarantee of surviving. As the convoy rolled toward the scene, Sarah's mind raced. This was different. Not a boy, not a broken soldier. This was militants, hardened and armed, using civilians as bargaining chips. Could her voice reach them? Could words cut through ideology the way they cut through grief? Watched her from the opposite seat, reading the doubt on her face. Don't freeze, Doc, he said. You're in this now, no backing out. Sarah met his eyes. What if this is the one I can't reach? His gaze softened just slightly. Then you tried, and sometimes trying is the only damn thing worth doing. The convoy jolted over a pothole. The night stretched out ahead, filled with headlights, dust, and the weight of another impossible choice. Sarah tightened her grip on the radio. Because no matter what command said, no matter how many reports stamped non-standard resolution crossed their desks, she knew one truth. Someone had to try. How do you reason with men who don't want to live? How do you talk to those who see death not as tragedy, but as reward? The convoy slowed as they approached the Kandahar highway. Headlights revealed chaos ahead. Afghan police cars blocking the road, soldiers crouched behind sandbags, civilians clustered behind makeshift barricades. And there, at the center of it all, an old civilian bus, its windows shattered, its sides riddled with bullet holes. Sarah felt the air tighten around her chest. Shadows moved inside the bus. Hostages pressed against the glass, wide-eyed, hands lifted in desperate signals for help. Muzzle flashes gleamed faintly from the interior, where rifles were trained outward at anyone who came near. Crouched beside her as the Humvee rolled to a stop. 4, maybe 5, demanding prisoner releases. One hostage already shot as proof they're serious. They say another dies every 15 minutes. Sarah's throat tightened. How many hostages left? 23, said grimly. Mostly women and kids, a few aid workers. Her pulse hammered. 23 lives. A countdown she couldn't see but felt in her bones. Command wants tactical options ready, added. But they gave you first crack. After that, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. After that, bullets. The night air pressed hot and heavy against her skin as Sarah stepped forward, radio in hand. She raised her voice, steady but loud enough to carry. This is Sarah. I'm not here to fight you. I only want to talk. Shouts echoed from inside the bus. Harsh, angry voices in Pashto. A rifle butt slammed against glass, cracking it further. Then one voice rose above the others, firm, measured, dangerous. You have nothing to say to us, woman. Leave or the next one dies. Sarah's stomach twisted. His tone was calm, almost casual, not a boy, not broken, a believer. Please, she called back, I only want to understand. Why here? Why these people? A harsh laugh answered her. Because they are pawns, and pawns are made to bleed so kings can be moved. Her heart sank. This wasn't grief speaking. This was strategy, cold, ruthless. His voice crackled in her earpiece. Doc, he's not biting. You've got 10 minutes before command pulls the plug. Sarah crouched behind the barricade, pressing her forehead into her hands. The militants they weren't like. They didn't want release from pain. They wanted leverage, spectacle, a message written in blood. How do you negotiate with men who see murder as language? She forced herself to breathe, to steady her racing thoughts. And then she realized something. Language. They wanted to be heard, to be amplified, and maybe, just maybe, she could turn that need into hesitation. She rose again, her voice clear. You say pawns must bleed, but kings fall too, don't they? Your leaders, the ones who sent you, where are they tonight? A pause, shuffling inside. Hostages whimpered. Then the same calm voice, sharper now. Do not speak of what you don't understand. Sarah pressed. I understand sacrifice. I've seen children die for wars they didn't start. I've seen fathers bury their families. That's not kingship. That's cowardice. Angry shouts erupted from inside. She had touched a nerve. Careful, woman, the voice spat. Your words are close to blasphemy. Or truth, Sarah countered, her voice trembling but firm. Truth is dangerous too, isn't it? That's why you hide behind children on a bus instead of facing soldiers head-on. The silence that followed was heavy. Cursed in her earpiece. Doc, what the hell are you doing? You're provoking him. But Sarah wasn't sure she had another choice. Reason alone wouldn't work. She had to unbalance him, crack the shell of certainty. Minutes dragged, then a sound. The bus door creaked open. Every rifle outside snapped up, fingers tightened on triggers. A hostage stumbled out, a woman barefoot shaking. She collapsed onto the asphalt, sobbing. The calm voice shouted from within. A gift, proof that we keep our word, one released for now, but test us again and the next one dies. Sarah's knees nearly buckled with relief. One life saved, one small victory. But 22 still inside. The woman was dragged to safety. Sarah crouched beside her as medics checked her over. Please, the woman whispered through sobs, clutching Sarah's hand. My daughter, she's still in there. Please don't let them. Her voice broke. Sarah squeezed her hand. I'll try, I promise I'll try. But inside, Sarah's heart screamed. How many promises could she keep before the bullets spoke louder? As the countdown ticked, Sarah tried again. She told that she wanted to hear their story. She asked what they hoped to achieve beyond blood. The calm voice spoke less now, shorter bursts, sharper edges, but each word revealed something, a fractured pride, a desperation for recognition. And then Sarah saw her chance. "You want the world to hear you," she called. "But the world doesn't hear bullets, it hears voices. Let me carry your message. Let me tell them why you fight." A long silence, murmurs inside, hostages whimpered. Then at last, "You will come closer, alone. If you lie, if you stall, we kill her first." A girl's scream cut the night, high-pitched, terrified. Sarah's stomach dropped. His voice exploded in her ear. "Negative. You're not stepping 1 foot toward that bus, Doc. That's an order." But Sarah already knew her choice. She pulled the earpiece free. The night fell silent. And she stepped into the open. Every soldier behind the barricade hissed in disbelief. "Drop your weapons." One seal snapped instinctively, as if the order could stop inevitability. But Sarah kept walking, her empty hands raised, her heart pounding like a drumbeat against her ribs. The bus loomed larger with each step. The glass glittered under floodlights. Behind it, shadows shifted, rifles aimed, hostages trembling, death waiting. She climbed the first step of the bus, her breath shallow, her body screaming with every instinct to stop. But she didn't. Because if she stopped now, the girl's scream would be the last sound she ever heard. The stench inside was suffocating. Sweat, blood, gunpowder. Hostages huddled in the aisles, eyes wide with terror. And there, standing in the aisle, rifle slung, detonator in hand, the man with the calm voice. He was older than she expected, lines carved deep into his face, eyes like stone. "You are braver than most," he said quietly, "or more foolish." Sarah swallowed hard, maybe both. He studied her, head tilted, curious. "And you truly believe you can talk us out of this?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted, "but I believe your story deserves to be heard without more children dying for it." The man's eyes flickered. For the first time, not certainty, but hesitation. It wasn't much, but it was something. And as Sarah stood there, unarmed, surrounded by rifles, heart pounding against inevitability, one thought cut through the terror. This was no longer about tactics. This was about whether words could reach men who believed they had nothing left to lose. And whether, in the kill zone of that bus, hope had one last chance to breathe. What does courage sound like in the silence before a trigger pull? What does dignity look like when death is inches away, but you refuse to move? The bus door shut behind Sarah with a clang that seemed to echo louder than the battlefield outside. The stale air pressed against her lungs. Hostages whimpered in the narrow aisle, their faces pale, streaked with sweat and tears. Rifles glinted under the dim overhead lights. And at the center, the man with the detonator in his hand, eyes cold as stone. He studied her in silence, his finger brushing the trigger of the device. One flick, and the whole bus could become a tomb. "You say you'll carry my story," he said at last, his voice quiet, almost conversational. "But why should I trust you? You are their tool, their mouthpiece. A woman who speaks soft so the soldiers don't have to." Sarah's breath came shallow. Her heart thundered, but her voice stayed steady. "Because I came in here unarmed. Because if I fail you, I die first." A murmur rippled among the hostages. They shifted uneasily. The leader's lips curled, not into a smile, but something like curiosity. "Do you even know what you're asking?" he pressed. "We fight for freedom, for justice, for vengeance. Can you give me any of those with your words?" Sarah let the silence breathe. Then she spoke softly, each word deliberate. "No, I can't give you freedom, or justice, or vengeance, but I can give you a choice. To end this without another child's scream being the last sound you hear." For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Not weakness, but recognition. A splinter of doubt. He raised the detonator slightly, holding it between them like a question. "And if I choose the scream instead?" Sarah swallowed hard. She thought of his body of trembling as he cut the wires, of sobbing as he dropped his rifle into the dirt. And she said quietly, "Then I stay here with them. I die too, because dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." The words hung in the heavy air. A hostage, a little girl clutching a ragged doll, looked up at the leader with wide, tear-filled eyes. Her lips trembled as she whispered something too soft for Sarah to hear, but the leader heard it. His jaw clenched. His hand tightened on the detonator. The silence stretched, seconds that felt like eternity. Outside, crouched behind the barricade, sweat dripping down his neck. His radio crackled with commands shouting in his ear, but his eyes were locked on that bus. He knew one thing with certainty. If Sarah didn't walk out alive in the next 60 seconds, they were breaching. And he also knew that if they breached, no one inside would survive. Inside, the leader lowered the detonator just slightly. His voice shook now, the cracks finally showing. "You think words can undo a war, that your softness can fix the graves already filled." Sarah's throat tightened. "No, words can't bring back the dead, but they can stop us from digging more graves tonight." For the first time, the leader's eyes left hers. They flicked toward the hostages, toward the girl with the doll, toward his men who shifted nervously, rifles sagging under the weight of a choice none of them had expected to face. One of them muttered something in Pashto, uncertain, fearful. The leader barked at him, but the command lacked conviction. And Sarah knew. The fracture was there, small, fragile, but real. "Let them go," she said softly. "Prove that you are more than what they call you. Show the world you chose mercy, not slaughter." The leader's hand trembled. His face twisted with rage, grief, conflict. And then slowly, painfully, he lowered the detonator. He turned to his men, his voice hoarse. "Release them." Chaos erupted. Hostages scrambled toward the door, sobbing, clutching one another. Soldiers outside shouted in disbelief as one by one, civilians poured out of the bus into waiting arms. Sarah stood frozen, barely breathing as the flood of humanity rushed past her. 22 lives saved. Until only she and the militants remained. The leader looked at her again, eyes hollow. "Now you have your miracle, woman, but miracles don't last. When they write this story, they will still call me a monster." Sarah's voice cracked, but she held his gaze. "Maybe, but tonight you chose not to be." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he tossed the detonator onto a seat, the sound sharp in the silence. "Go," he muttered. Sarah hesitated. "And you?" His jaw clenched. "We stay. The war will claim us anyway." She wanted to argue, to tell him surrender didn't have to mean death, but his eyes told her he had already chosen his fate. So she turned, and she walked out of the bus into the floodlights, her hands shaking, her face streaked with tears and dust. The moment her boots hit the asphalt, soldiers surged forward. Was the first to reach her, his hand gripping her arm like an anchor. "You're insane," he whispered hoarsely, but his voice cracked. His eyes burned with something that looked like pride. Behind them, the bus erupted in gunfire, shouts, screams, and then silence. When it ended, the hostages were safe. The militants were dead. But Sarah knew the truth. The choice had already been made inside. Hours later, in the stillness of dawn, Sarah sat alone on the hood of a Humvee, the desert stretching endless around her. Her body ached, her mind spun. She thought of the hostages, mothers clutching children, men who would carry tonight's terror in their eyes forever. She thought of the militants, their faces, their doubt, their final choice. And she thought of her own reflection in the shattered bus window, a woman who had walked unarmed into death and somehow walked back out. Approached quietly, dropping a canteen beside her. "You saved them," he said simply. Sarah shook her head. "I didn't save anyone. They chose to live. That's what saved them." Was silent for a long time, then he sat beside her. "Command can argue doctrine all they want, but I saw it. We all saw it. You proved something tonight, that even in war mercy has teeth." Sarah's eyes filled, though she blinked the tears away. Her voice was barely a whisper. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The desert wind carried her words away, scattering them across the endless horizon. And in that silence the war rumbled on. But somewhere, buried in the rubble and the grief, hope had found a pulse again.